Hello everybody. Coming to you live from a horizontal position on my sofa because I worked a night shift last night and I didn't really manage to nap very much today, so not gonna lie, pretty knackered. But we're off to Edinburgh tomorrow for 2 nights, which I'm very excited about, mostly to get caught up on some odd jobs that we booked to get done last month, but then ended up getting cancelled because there was a lot of snow and we couldn't travel. And now we're kind of trying to get stuff caught up before the end of the year. But I'm also hoping to see some friends, and I'm going to take myself out for dinner if my friends are not available, because it was quite a short notice trip. And I quite like to go on one of my old running routes, so I might do that while I'm in Edinburgh as well. I'm just excited to go back to Edinburgh, to be honest, because for anyone who is new to the podcast / blog, Andrew, my husband, and I lived in Edinburgh for about 18 years, and we just moved up to Inverness this summer, which is where Andrew's folks are, and we're very much enjoying our new lives, but it's obviously just taking time to settle in, and I definitely feel homesick for Edinburgh and our old lives from time to time. So yeah, it's a weird mixed feeling going back to Edinburgh. I'm 90% looking forward to it, but I'm not gonna lie, there's this 10% of me that's like a little bit daunted, because is it just gonna make me a little bit sad, you know? But I'm gonna try really hard to have a positive attitude and enjoy the time that I've got there. The Christmas market will be on and all the Christmas lights will be out, which is another reason why I thought it'd be nice to go for a run, because I used to enjoy that run during the festive season. And Andrew's out for dinner with his friends on the Thursday night, so if my pals are not all around, I am definitely planning on taking myself out for an artist date. I'm reading The Artist's Way at the moment, which I want to get further into it before I discuss it on the blog and the podcast, but it's a book about unlocking your creativity, and one of the things that is suggested is going on artist dates, where you take yourself on a solo date to do something, whatever you want really, but the idea is it helps foster your sort of inspiration and creativity. And I thought that Thursday night would be the perfect time. I might take myself on a walk round the city centre, see all the Christmas lights, maybe go to the Christmas market, and then take myself out for dinner. So that is my backup plan if my friends are not around. But mostly we're going to get haircuts, if I'm honest, because that was the thing that got cancelled last month, and we're both looking incredibly shaggy, so need to get that sorted before Christmas. But the reason I popped on tonight was I thought it would be a nice opportunity, coming to the end of the year. I want to write a blog post and probably record a podcast about sort of reflections on 2024, and then maybe another one on sort of goals and thoughts for 2025. But I haven't really had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to kind of formulate any thoughts on that yet, so nothing concrete. But something that came up recently on a podcast that I listened to, A Beautiful Mess, in case anyone else is a fan, and I was talking with my bestie. Hi, Victoria, if you're listening. We were talking recently about style words, so words that you ascribe to your own sense of style, that kind of act as like your style values, so that it helps you make, I guess, sort of better, more cohesive sartorial choices, so that ultimately over time your wardrobe is hopefully a sort of, like cohesive curated collection, I guess, of items that all go together. And I've been thinking a lot about this recently because A Beautiful Mess talks about it, and I actually went through this process back in 2020. I can't remember if I blogged about it. I think I probably have in the past, so I'll go back and have a look and see if I can find the old blog post. But essentially, in sort of 2019 into 2020, I was sort of in a bit of a career limbo. It was kind of one pretty major job that I had thought was going to be a sort of lifelong job, came to an end somewhat unexpectedly and in quite sort of stressful circumstances. Sorry to sort of be hinting at drama, but kind of don't want to get into it too much on the podcast. But it's yeah, it was just quite a stressful time and involved a lot of people being made redundant and things like that, which is another reason why I don't want to go into it in too much detail, because obviously it wasn't just me that was affected. But I left that job and I took a very different job, a teaching job at a university. And that was probably the first time in my career that I've had to really think about what I wore to work, sort of clothing wise. Because, sorry, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a vet, a small animal veterinarian, for anyone listening from the States. And so when I go to work, I don't often think that hard about, or I haven't in the past, about what I wear, because either changed into scrubs when I get to work, or I'm putting a scrub top on over the top of the clothes that I'm wearing underneath. So on the top half, at least, I might be wearing just like a t-shirt or something like that, because a scrub top's going to go over the top and you're not going to see the t-shirt anyway. And then in previous jobs, if I haven't worn scrub trousers, I would wear just sort of comfortable but fairly smart trousers, just because obviously being a small animal vet is a client-facing job. So I would wear, yeah, just like generally dark coloured sort of slacks, chino type trousers, or even jeans, but like, dark coloured and smart-ish, but stretchy, because you're obviously spending a lot of time sort of getting down on the floor with dogs and animals and whatnot. And I was never that bothered about wearing super smart clothes, because being a vet, there's obviously a decent amount of bodily fluids involved. And so anything you wear to work, you kind of have to be okay with the fact that it might get completely trashed. So yeah, I've never really had a quote unquote work wardrobe in the sort of traditional sense. And I've never really thought that much about what I wore to work until I started this teaching job. And obviously you're teaching, university students, so you want to look smart and presentable, but also approachable, but also like a bit of an authority figure. So it's a bit of a tough balance to strike there. And I was in a shared office with more senior teachers, more senior lecturers. So I wanted to be smart and presentable for when I was speaking to them as well. And it was probably the first time in my career that I've really had to think about what my work wardrobe looked like. And if I'm honest, it was pretty lacking. So I remember in those first couple of weeks, I was basically just cobbling together outfits from like the same, maybe like 4 or 5 smart-ish tops and trousers. And then I went out shopping, but because it was a 6-month fixed term contract, it was a mat leave cover. So I didn't really want to spend loads of money on my wardrobe, because I didn't know if the contract was going to get extended at the end of it, because obviously the person on mat leave would come back from mat leave and there might not be a role for me anymore. And B, because I'd never worked in academia before, I wasn't even sure if I wanted the contract extended. So to my mind, the 6-month fixed term kind of worked perfectly, because I got to sort of dip my toe in academia without having to commit to a permanent contract. But from a sartorial point of view, it meant that there kind of wasn't much point me going out and spending loads of money on a sort of work wardrobe, because I didn't really know if this was going to be my ongoing / long-term career, or if in 6 months' time I'd be going back to some kind of clinical job and all my smart new clothes would become kind of useless. And then, as it happened, the 6 months ran into March 2020, April 2020, which was obviously the start of the pandemic. And the last 3 weeks of that contract actually was the start of lockdown. So I worked from home for the last 3 weeks, and then, unsurprisingly, they didn't extend my contract because there was obviously just too much upheaval with COVID and whatnot. So yeah, and then at that point, I was actually unemployed for a month, because the work that I had lined up for after that contract finishing didn't materialise because of the pandemic. Badger has thoughts, just in case you can hear him whining in the background. And so, yeah, I was then sort of in this kind of awkward place of I had all this free time suddenly because I was unemployed. I was job hunting, but, it wasn't really sort of in-person job hunting the way it was sort of pre-pandemic. So it wasn't like I needed sort of smart interview clothes or anything like that. But I was at home all day, so I actually worked my way through Love to Sew podcast's Sew Your Dream Wardrobe, I think it was called. I'll put a link in the show notes, so in case anyone else is interested. It's a free pamphlet download that you get when you sign up to their newsletter. I think it's only about 6 or 8 pages from memory, but I actually found it really useful, and it was kind of the perfect time in my life to do it, because I was sort of in this weird sort of career-wise limbo, even before I was essentially made unemployed. I wasn't really quite sure where my career was going at that point. And then I ended up getting a job that started in the June, so I only ended up having the May off, which was, in retrospect, actually quite nice, because it was, peak lockdown. It was that time in lockdown where you were only allowed out for an hour a day, and we would walk the dogs through Edinburgh city centre, and in this really weird way, it was actually really lovely how quiet it was, that there was no one around. But obviously in this really sort of, it was nice at the time, but kind of for all the wrong reasons, because obviously the reason it was so quiet was because of this like horrendous global pandemic situation. But because it was May, it was also Me Made May, which I'm sure everybody listening is aware of Me Made May, but just in case you're not, it's run by Zoe Edwards of Sozo blog and Check Your Thread podcast. I'll link them below as well. And she's been running it for, I want to say like at least 10 years, maybe 12 years. And essentially the idea is in May, you wear as many of your handmade clothes as you feel able. And if you feel comfortable doing so, a lot of people document their makes and their outfits as well, either with photos or videos, and post them on social media. And that part's by no means essential, but that particular May, we had our hour a day of government mandated exercise, and I would get Andrew to take photos of my outfits, and I actually found the process really illuminating, because suddenly I'd never really taken regular photos of my outfits before, like full length outfit pictures, and just looking back at the pictures, it became very obvious to me sort of what colours worked, what didn't, what clothes fit me, which didn't. Often I realised it was the clothes that I already kind of had a gut feeling about, that they weren't quite the right colour or quite the right fit. But for whatever reason, my sort of more rational brain kind of overrode that instinct. I think because I'm, naturally quite a thrifty / sustainably minded person. So I wouldn't want to waste, in inverted commas, clothes. So if I'd bought something, even if I'd bought something often in a charity shop, because a lot of my clothes, even before I was making clothes, most of my clothes came from secondhand sources. So even though I maybe hadn't paid that much money and they were secondhand anyway, I would sort of feel this pressure of like, oh, well, now I own it, I have to wear it, because otherwise it's wasteful. I've wasted the time, I've wasted the money, I've wasted the resource. If I redonate it or whatever, that I would feel a lot of guilt and shame if I'd bought clothes that then didn't fit me very well or didn't suit me. But then the flip side of that is I would sort of force myself to wear things that didn't really feel like me or didn't feel that comfortable for whatever reason. And I didn't sort of set about in that May sort of consciously planning to kind of curate my wardrobe, but that's ultimately what ended up happening, because I took all these photos, or Andrew took all these photos of me during that Me Made May, and that whole process just made me really realise how much of my wardrobe wasn't really serving me. And then around the same time, I was listening to Love to Sew podcast. I used to listen to it quite religiously, and I was a Patreon for a while. I actually haven't listened to it in a long time, but it's definitely a good podcast. It's worth a listen if you haven't come across it. And then, they were talking about this Sew Your Dream Wardrobe pamphlet. So I downloaded that and worked through it. And I just found that process super helpful as well. Like, you identify... So I think you start off... what would have been really helpful would have been if I'd had this in front of me. But I am not that well organised. I literally sat down spur of the moment to... record this. There's a Labrador right here. Rub that tum-tum. And I've got the Beechwood Fireplace on Netflix. So we're very cozy and curried in here, but yeah, not at all organised. So apologies. But yeah, if I remember correctly, you go through a whole process of identifying your style kind of goals and aspirations. So it sort of guides you through like thinking about your lifestyle, for example, like what kind of lifestyle do you actually lead versus what lifestyle do you maybe want to lead? Like, does your wardrobe reflect the life that you actually live rather than the life that you maybe would like to live? And then part of that as well was curating a Pinterest board. So they suggest, it doesn't have to be a Pinterest board, but obviously Pinterest's a nice, easy way to do it. They suggest sort of gathering inspiration sources together. And especially with things like Pinterest, they were saying the best thing to do is to just pin everything that you're interested in, everything that sort of strikes a chord with you. You know, you don't have to like every single aspect of the outfit or the picture, but if, you know, you like that person's hat, you like that colour, you like that texture, you like that fabric, pin it all, and then over time, when you look back, you start to notice themes developing. And I definitely found that to be true. So that was a super helpful exercise. And then the next step is to think about sort of colours. And this is, again, where Pinterest was quite helpful. So one of the things I noticed with my Pinterest was that I started noticing themes appearing with regards to colours. So like certain colours like forest green, navy blue, cream, kind of popping up over and over again. And then you sort of note down your sort of 4 or 5 kind of core colours that you think will suit you, but also, you know, you like, they feel like you in inverted commas. And then they sort of start to form the kind of core colours that you would base your wardrobe around. And then the last step, and this is the step that I sort of came on to talk about, is you choose 3 words. And obviously it doesn't have to be 3, it could be 2, it could be 5, whatever works for you. But you choose a small number of words that sort of encapsulate your wardrobe and your sense of style. And the idea is that those become your sort of core values, in inverted commas, for your wardrobe. And then when you're out and about, either thrifting or shopping or even crafting, obviously you can apply this to sort of sewing or knitting projects, you think about those words and you think about those colours and you think, you know, is this pattern or yarn or fabric or item in the charity shop, does it fit within that sort of framework? And if it does, then great, go ahead, buy it, wear it, love it, make it. If it doesn't, then, you know, maybe you're best leaving it behind. And I found that part really helpful, because the thing with shopping secondhand, and I'm sure you've all come across this if you've ever been in a charity shop, is there's definitely that element of like, ooh, but it's such a bargain. Oh, it's only 50p, or oh, it's on the clearance rail. Or I would often get swept up with like, oh, it's not really my colours, but it's a really good brand. So you know it's going to be really well made, you know, because it's Boden or COS or Arquette or whatever, Gap. So you think, well, it's going to be really well made. I mean, yeah, it would be better if it were blue instead of pink, but you know, it's going to be a really good quality t-shirt and it's only £1. And the problem with that for me was I did that for basically most of my 20s and my early 30s, really. And so I ended up with this just like completely random selection of clothes in my wardrobe, often of which didn't really go together, didn't really suit me, weren't really colours that sort of expressed my personality, represented who I am or how I want to kind of show myself to the world. And then that was what I found doing that Me Made May in 2020 really helped me identify, was like all the things in my wardrobe that actually weren't fitting into that kind of framework. So actually at the end of that summer, if I remember rightly, I donated something like 5 bags of clothes to charity. And I definitely went through a phase where I was like, oh my God, I've got basically no clothes left. But yeah, it was a super helpful process. And I would say, because I'm a bit of an all or nothing thinker, so to my mind, I was like, right, that's it. wardrobe sorted, never have to think about it again. And one thing I would definitely say I've learned since then is that it's kind of an ongoing process, like defining your style, thinking about your style, what you like, ultimately what we wear, the clothes we choose to wear, whether we like it or not, sort of reflects who we are as a person, whether we've sort of consciously made those decisions when we've put clothes on in the morning, or subconsciously made those decisions by not really thinking about it and just throwing on whatever. You're sort of communicating to the world like your values, your interests, a little bit in a way of who you are as a person. And I would never want to say, that's it, like your clothes wholly define you. You couldn't possibly be a different person by wearing different clothes, sort of thing. But I do think it's sensible to be cognizant of the fact that, people look at your clothes and they form judgments of you, right? Like rightly or wrongly. And whilst I definitely don't think you should dress to please other people, I do think for me personally, I like to dress to please myself. And I've realised over the years that I actually get a lot of joy from getting dressed. I get a lot of joy from clothes. I get a lot of joy from thinking about clothes, planning my wardrobe, whether that's sewing and knitting projects that I'm planning, or whether that's thrifting, like browsing vintage for a particular item that, I think will really work with an outfit. I really enjoy that whole process. And I think it's taken me a long time to accept that, because I don't know, like, I know this sounds super judgy and I don't mean it to be, but it feels kind of frivolous. I think there's probably an element of misogyny in this, isn't it? Because I'm sure men don't think it's frivolous to think about their clothes. But I don't know, I've always felt like, I don't know, for me personally, it's felt kind of frivolous to think about clothes. I think should be thinking about bigger, more important things. There's all this awful things going on in the world. I should be caring more about all the horror and learning more about, the world. And don't get me wrong, I fully believe that you should be an engaged citizen of the world, but both things can be true. You can be an engaged citizen of the world and still care about your clothes and still want to read about fashion and trends and, follow people on social media that inspire you, and there's nothing wrong with that, I know you know this. I'm kind of saying it to myself because I think for a long time that's how I felt. So once I kind of gave myself permission to enjoy my clothes and enjoy the process of getting dressed and of thinking about my wardrobe and what it communicates, suddenly realised that, this is actually like quite a big part of my life. And it has been for a long time. I think I just haven't allowed myself like the space to think about it. Do you have something to say? Do you have something you want to share with the class? Is that what you're saying? Badger has thoughts. So ultimately, in the values section, I came to the conclusion that my 3 words that reflect my style are androgynous, practical, and stylish. So androgynous because I've always been a bit of a tomboy, quote unquote. I kind of hate that. It's so like gender normative or whatever, isn't it? But even as a kid, I was always called a tomboy. Like there's a famous story in my family about, baby Amy going to a wedding. I think I was a bridesmaid or a flower girl, having to wear this like puffy silk dress and hating it and insisting on wearing jeans underneath. And then at some point over the course of the day, like kicking a football towards a pond and my like silk ballet slipper flying off into this pond and disappearing, never to be seen again. Of course, my mother was probably extremely upset because I have no doubt that the shoes and the outfit probably cost quite a lot of money. Sorry, Mum, if you're listening. So I've always been a bit of a tomboy. And I think in my 20s, I sort of experimented a bit more with more like traditional sort of feminine, quote unquote, clothes, wearing dresses, wearing skirts, wearing heels. And I just slowly came to the conclusion that that's just not really for me. It doesn't feel like me. So I actually remember the moment I decided I was never going to wear heels again was after my wedding. I wore heels when I got married. And then I swapped into flat shoes in the evening, just like lots of people do when they get married. And then after that, I was like, that's it. I'm done with heels. Like I just, yeah, I just don't want to anymore. They're uncomfortable. I don't feel myself in them. I can't really walk in them. I end up with shredded feet. It doesn't really matter what heels. I would always end up with shredded feet. And then it would take at least 2 to 3 days for my feet, the muscles in my feet, to feel back to normal, and then probably the best part of a week for any like blisters or rubs or whatever to heal. And it just wasn't worth it for me, to be honest. Like, so I just stopped, got rid of all my heels except my wedding heels. I've still got them. And then, yeah, just sort of gradually phased out wearing dresses, like passed on all my dresses to other friends or donated them, and just kind of haven't now worn dresses for probably at least 5 or 6 years. And not that that's anything like particularly like inflammatory, but it took me a long time to realize that just wasn't really for me. And then I'm actually a lot more comfortable in more sort of gender neutral styles. Andrew and I actually share a fair amount of clothes now, because he wears a sort of size small men's, which fits quite nicely on me as a sort of slightly oversized boxy style, which I quite like. And actually I've realised that if I shop the men's section in charity shops or on Vinted, I often find things that I like a lot more than if I shop in the women's section. So that was kind of a little revelation that has definitely unlocked a lot of style potential for me. So that's the androgynous style part. Practical, like anyone who knows me in the real world will know that I'm quite a practical person. Like I'm constantly busy doing stuff, like making things, cleaning things, organizing things. Like I'm quite a practical, kind of down to earth, I guess, kind of person. I like to make things with my hands. I'm not that you can't be practical and into beauty by any means, but I don't really wear makeup. I don't really do stuff with my nails. I moisturize, don't get me wrong, otherwise I would look like a raisin. But beyond that, I don't really do a lot of those other sort of more traditional beauty regime things. And I guess for me, that partly comes down to just practicality. It's just easier for me in my life. Like, I'm not very good at that stuff. I've never really practiced at it. And I don't really want to spend the time learning now. I'm okay with just not. And the kind of life I lead, like I'm quite often outside. Now we have a garden. I spend a lot of time outside in the garden, and I'm just quite, bangs my hand. I'm just quite a practical person, so my clothes need to reflect that. Like, I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to go about my day-to-day business without like tight waistbands digging in or feeling like I'm constantly having to kind of readjust my clothes. But, and this ties into my third word, I want to be stylish. I want to look nice. And I don't necessarily mean stylish like trendy, but I want to look like I'm thought about what I'm wearing, that things are coordinated, that colours match, or my outfits look curated, you know? I definitely in my 20s did a lot of just throwing on whatever came to hand. And now I look back on some of those photos and I just think I just looked a bit of a shambles, you know? And I definitely want to feel more cohesive, curated, more put together now. And the thing with being a quote unquote practical person is it could go the other way, right? You could be a very practical person, but not really care about style, which, you know, no shade on those people. That's totally a choice as well. But yeah, I definitely want to look like I've chosen my clothing with thought and intention, you know? And actually, since I came up with those 3 words, I've stuck to them pretty religiously. So that's coming up on sort of 4.5, 5 years. And I still feel like those 3 words kind of reflect who I am sartorially, but also sort of on a personal level. They have to be words that reflect you as a person. And then obviously your clothes reflect you as a person. So it all sort of works together synergistically. The Labrador agrees. She's rolling on her back for a tummy rub. So yeah, I feel like those 3 words have worked really well, and but never say never. Maybe they'll change in the future. Don't want to be an all or nothing thinker about it. But yeah, for now, those are definitely 3 words that I find very useful when I'm picking patterns to sew or knit, picking colours as well, like the colour part of the Love to Sew Dream wardrobe I found super helpful. And then, yeah, every so often I just go through and have a think about what's in my wardrobe, maybe get rid of a few bits, sell some bits on Vinted, or pass things along to charity. And so I feel like I'm sort of constantly in sort of curation mode, you know? And yeah, so far that has worked very well for me. But I'm very aware that I'm nearly at 30 minutes. This is probably my longest podcast to date. And I probably have more to say, to be honest. But I think what I'll do is I'll leave it here because the dogs are getting a bit restless. And my throat's a bit dry. I could definitely do with a cup of tea. Maybe a piece of Toblerone. But yes, I will leave it here. Let me know your thoughts if you have been through any similar processes. I know there are books out there like The Curated Closet. Let me know. I would love to chat about this in the comments. I do love a bit of values chat. And I'll definitely be back next week with some kind of... Oh, next week's Christmas, actually, isn't it? Thinking about it. So, Merry Christmas to all who celebrate. Happy holidays to those who don't and are just enjoying the time off. We're not a religious family, so we will be enjoying the food and the Labrador snuggles. If you can hear, I don't know if you can hear her tail. Oh, of course, the moment I hold my mobile up to her tail, she stops. But you can hear the thump, thump, thump of her wagging her tail at you. So I will leave it here. Have a lovely festive period, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye.